And I think to myself,
Don't be racist. I am a racist.
I don't know. Tomahawks? I don't know. Is that right? That's what it is? Okay. So got to what? 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 So my toe? No, no. So got to.
First, I want to say thank you to the student who recorded this. I understand wholeheartedly what it feels like to be in that situation where the power dynamics do not weigh in your favor. I understand how it feels to stop and freeze and wonder to yourself, like, is this really happening? Because in those situations, it's the most difficult to stand up and say stop. And so now, this is where I step in. This footage was taken at John W. North High School in Riverside, California, where a math teacher put on a headdress, started whooping, war tomahawking, and dancing and singing, as you all saw. Now this is very, very racist, ignorant, and disgusting. It makes me wonder, what kind of diversity, equity, and inclusion training do John W. North High School teachers go through, if any? I'm really curious. Because this behavior is not a good representation for your school. And so now this is a call to action. Beautiful people, if you could be so kind and support us by contacting the principal of John W. North High School, Jody Gonzalez, that would be greatly appreciated. Please ask them to hold this teacher accountable. Please ask them to incorporate diversity, equity, and inclusion trainings for all their educators and staff members. And ask them to host the Native community on their school campus during Native American Heritage Month. I will list out all the contact information in my comments. And to the educator, have the day you deserve.
Strange foods from Mexico.
Cactus?
Nopal, Kyle.
That's strange. Like, Mexicans eat plants coming from the ground. I eat cheese made out of plastic, because that's not weird.
Did you know that there are autonomous indigenous communities in Mexico? Reservations in the United States and Canada are not the only ones that exist. Essentially, the Mexican Constitution guarantees that self-determination allows indigenous communities to elect citizens' councils, receive public funding directly, and administer their own police, infrastructure, health, and other sort of services. Cheran is an example of a beautiful indigenous Purepecha community. They got tired of the narco violence and environmental destruction that was happening in their community and asserted this self-determination. Same goes for Huitziltzilampa, an indigenous Otomi Ñato community. We also have the town of Yucuquimi, which is a Mixtec community. So what you see here is that they declared themselves to be an autonomous indigenous municipality. It takes a lot of effort and continuous fight for the government to continue to respect their autonomy. And so we see the formation of things like the Congreso Nacional Indígena to come.
Georgia presente.
Washington, aquí presente.
Arizona está presente.
California presente.
Colorado presente.
Michigan presente.
To say son of a B word is crazy to me because I feel like we are targeting women. But in theory, if I say we're targeting women, that makes me a part of the problem because that's the internalized misogyny, right? Because if I say son of a B, I'm like, oh, we probably shouldn't say that. I feel like we should say son of a very loving woman who tried her best to raise a child, even though she was a single mother, right? But that's just because I'm thinking to myself, oh, we're saying B word, I automatically think women, and that's a problem in myself, right? So I feel like
about like the technological prowess. It's all about the human sacrifice.
Whether or not there was sacrifices is actually something that's up like historically for debate. However, why are people pretending like going to beheadings wasn't like a fun Saturday afternoon activity? Okay? Like what? They ate people. The Victorians ate mummies. What? So y'all be like beheading your neighbors, going to public executions with your fucking kids. But if brown people do that, it's barbaric. I don't understand it. I don't understand it.
A few months ago, I had a rude awakening. In a world where people profess to be continuously unlearning and diversifying their feeds, it seemed like the African continent was escaping their woke curriculums. With a sudden and unexpected interest in my food, I was excited to share with the world the beauty of Ghanaian food. Finally, I thought to myself, people will get to see how amazing, nuanced, diverse our cuisines are and the cuisines across West Africa and the African continent as a whole. I felt that I could play a very, very small role in helping people deconstruct the monolithic view of Africa through my food. I poured my heart and soul into research, into making my content aesthetically pleasing, to try and meet my audience halfway by breaking down so much of what people didn't understand about the ingredients and techniques that you would find in different dishes across the African continent. But I found myself bending over backwards, peeling off the layers of authenticity with my food, all to appease an audience that in the end was not truly committed to trying my food. Red palm oil became vegetable oil, grains of celery became optional instead of mandatory, and dawa dawa was relegated to the bottom of the ingredient list. The food is too intimidating, they said. I am scared of cooking this dish, they said. I didn't feel comfortable sourcing these ingredients, they said. They started to leave, and in their thousands, I'm actually not exaggerating. Slowly, I started to question the necessity of this platform. Why are people here asking so much labor of me just to stare at me cooking, but will jump headfirst to create dishes from other parts of the world? I really do not care about amassing a following. My dream is not just for people to hear about Ghanaian food, West African food in general, but also to taste it. And in tasting it, understanding why the food is just as amazing as anything else. In the last few months, I have been taking some time to truly reflect on my platform and social media as a whole. I have accepted now that there's a lot that I personally cannot change. There's still a negative perception of the African continent coupled with anti-blackness that simply needs deep reflection and unpacking. I personally can't do that for people. I also cannot change who I am nor the essence of the dishes I make. One cannot simply substitute dawa dawa as it is as West African as it gets, and coconut oil can never capture the depth of flavor that red palm oil has. When I shared with you all of these concerns, I mentioned I will provide more clarity on my platform once I have it all thought through, and here is that clarity. Moving forward, I'm going to just keep doing me. I'm going to keep digging into my roots more than I have ever done. In the end, this page is also about me documenting how far I have come as a cook, now making traditional meals from scratch, sharing with people how one can keep their culture while choosing to live a vegan lifestyle, sharing ingredients, and most important to me, sharing my childhood favorite. Realizing all of these have meant more freedom from worrying about whether people will actually try some of these dishes, because I'm not sure if that will change. My current reality is not going to stop me from sharing and creating the dishes that I like. The end. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
Come and get your girl, yeah. She be tryna flirt, so I tell that wait, whoa, wait, whoa.
There's a big difference between being like, oh, hey, like, I'm also LGBT, there's no reason for you to feel like you're unsafe in a situation, versus me communicating to you that I'm trans and your first response is that you also like women.
Colonizers are not gonna like this. Human footprints were found in New Mexico that are about 23,000 years old, which suggests that people were arriving on Turtle Island long before the Ice Age glaciers melted. This archaeological evidence further proves that indigenous people of these continents were here long before any recorded data suggests. And most importantly, that the land bridge theory is just that, a theory. Now, indigenous peoples have been telling stories of our arrival and our emergence from this land for such a long time, and we know that we've been here long before anyone else were. But now that we have white archaeologists proving that we were correct, y'all are gonna listen. Which is fine, because now you know, what we have known.
The third world is not poor. You don't go to poor countries to make money. There are very few poor countries in this world. Most countries are rich. The Philippines are rich. Brazil is rich. Mexico is rich. Chile is rich. Only the people are poor. But there's billions to be made there, to be carved out and to be taken. There's been billions for 400 years. The capitalist European and North American powers have carved out and taken the timber, the flax, the hemp, the cocoa, the rum, the tin, the copper, the iron, the rubber, the bauxite, the slaves, and the cheap labor. They have taken out of these countries. These countries are not underdeveloped, they're overexploited.
I don't know. You tell me. My first language was Otomi, an indigenous language. I'm currently living in Mexico right now, most of the time in my indigenous pueblo. I am not a reconnecting native. I've known about my indigenous roots since I was born. My biggest issue with the term no sabo kid is how anti-indigenous it can be. My parents literally did not learn Spanish until their late teens. And I know that's the case for so many indigenous people. And a lot of the indigenous people who do only know Spanish aren't that great at it, because surprise, surprise, what do indigenous people lack? Resources, one of those being education. And then when these people have kids, it's no fucking surprise that their Spanish is bad, and English being their predominant language because they go to fucking school. I just fucking hate how Mexicans find their validity in the fucking language as if a fucking giant chunk of Mexico doesn't even speak Spanish.
Let's talk about the hundreds of activists that were arrested in DC. A week-long demonstration has been happening in DC for People versus Fossil Fuels. The indigenous-led coalition are calling for Biden to declare a national climate emergency and to stop all fossil fuel projects like Line 3. On Thursday, activists entered the U.S. Department of the Interior in peaceful protest. Law enforcement started to skirmish with the people outside, resulting in multiple injuries and arrests. Activists were trying to actively keep open the only unlocked door for those inside. Many eyewitnesses say that the police escalated things out of proportion, using excessive force against the protesters. The Indigenous Environmental Network made a statement that same day. Politicians do not care of us. Presidents will break their promises, but Mother Earth has always given us what we need to thrive. We will not back down until our natural balance is restored.
In defense of Christopher Columbus, let's go. I posted a tweet today that said, "Don't let anyone gloss over or rewrite our history. Happy Columbus Day." And apparently that is a very controversial statement. Here's why it's not controversial, because we don't get to judge historical figures from hundreds of years ago through the lens of modernity.
Let's go. We don't have to do that. Had you done a minute amount of research regarding this topic, you would have learned that Christopher Columbus was arrested, dragged back to Spain, where he was stripped of his titles for his treatment of the Taino people. And I'm going to assume you know nothing about the history as well, so let me educate you. Not only did he enslave them, but had someone went out and not returned with any gold, he would cut their limbs off and make them wear it around their necks, or even kill them. What he would also do was strip babies away from their mothers and feed them to their Spaniard dogs for entertainment.
But what I want to do is a little experiment. Let's talk about other people that we put on a pedestal in our society and the transgressions that they've committed, and let's see if we hold the same energy for them as we do for Christopher Columbus.
What you did here was very interesting. You list off Mahatma Gandhi, President Barack Obama, W.E.B. Du Bois, and Martin Luther King Jr. But what you ultimately did was breathe life into a narrative that has very strong genocidal undertones and indigenous erasure. And the way that you did that was highlighted transgressions of individuals within recent history to that of an individual who opened the door to the transatlantic slave trade and the genocide of indigenous peoples of the Western Hemisphere. And if you look at it from that perspective, it doesn't really equal out.
While we are here subjecting Christopher Columbus to modern standards, we don't even subject our people to modern day standards.
I'm going to safely assume that what you mean by our people, you mean conservatives. And trust me, we are trying so hard to hold you all up to a standard that meets our modern day context. But if you all want to celebrate Christopher Columbus in true Columbus fashion and spread disease, do you.
Let me remind you.
Have the day you deserve.
Zoot suit riots in 1943. Zoot suiters were usually youth Latinos. It was seen as unpatriotic to be a zoot suiter because there were a huge ration on wool and other textiles, and zoot suiters used a lot of that. A group of sailors decided to attack a zoot suiter. They beat him horribly and then they left him almost naked. Every night since then, for like a month, sailors of the reserves, off-duty police officers, and white civilians, they would storm the city at night. They'll literally hunt them down. They'll go to movie theaters, they'll rip them out of their seats and they'll beat them up with like anything they can find, and they'll leave them naked in the street. They would also stop traffic and they'll pull zoot suiters from their cars and they'll beat them in the middle of the street. Cops would see this, but they would just continue watching, and then they would arrest the victim to quote unquote protect them. And it made it worse because the media would portray these attackers as patriotic vigilantes, but it was all racism. Because at that time, since a bunch of people went to World War II, California needed more workers. So there was an act with Mexico where they brought in a lot of agricultural workers. Because of that, there was more Mexicans and white people were getting more mad. And June 8th, they banned military bases from leaving. And the following day, they banned the zoot suit. So now we just like honor the Pachucos or Chicanos who are still keeping that culture alive.
Here's my hot take that shouldn't be considered that hot. The commodification of native culture is not exclusive to things like non-natives dressing up as natives for Halloween or native mascots, even though those are atrocious and horrible and things that we should work to get rid of. But it's also seen through corporations and companies only caring about native people during certain months or days, like Indigenous Peoples Day or November that's upcoming during Native Heritage Month. And I also see that a lot in individuals as well. Like many individuals only care about natives during certain periods of time. I understand that not everybody can care about every single issue at every single time, but it's just interesting that I like find myself thinking, I can't post this today, natives aren't trending yet. It's just very frustrating to exist and have your identities be like something that have to be trending for you to be able to talk about it or for it to be listened to. So that's my hot take of the day. Just act like native people exist all year, because maybe if we care about natives all year around and act like they exist all year around, we can cut down on the 40% of America that doesn't even think we're still alive. Have a good day, guys.
Let's have a look at some ethnic groups that are now extinct. Today, we'll be looking at the Tocharians of what is now China. Chinese documents that go back as far as 1,600 years ago describe an Indo-European speaking community. They had their own distinct branch of the Indo-European language family, and they resided in what is now the Xinjiang province of China. Now, it's believed that the Tarim Basin mummies found in the Xinjiang province may have been the early ancestors of the Tocharians. These mummified bodies definitely resemble modern-day Indo-European speaking communities. Now, these Tocharians started to disappear around 1,000 years ago, with the arrival of the Turkic communities from Central Asia, known today as the Turkic Uyghur people of the Xinjiang province. It's likely that the Tocharians assimilated into the Uyghur community, and so the Tocharian identity was eventually lost.
Okay, again, no shade to this creator, but I keep seeing shit like this on my For You page. Honestly, videos like these just kind of show that you've either never lived outside of the US or you're not from a pueblo. Because a lot of us that are from like really small pueblos understand that Catholicism is very interwoven with indigenous beliefs. A lot of indigenous beliefs had to be hidden within Catholicism, because had they not done that, they would have been killed for still practicing their indigenous beliefs. So, they found a way to mix it up with Catholicism. An example is Todos Santos. So Todos Santos is very much indigenous. There is a lot of indigenous beliefs behind that, but it's also very much Catholic. And it's not a surprise why it's so mixed together. And before y'all try to come for me, no, I'm not Catholic, but because I understand the nuances of being from a pueblo, I know that it's not that easy to just separate them after years, hundreds of years of manipulation and constant colonization. Y o sea, como siempre pongo de ejemplo con mi abuelita Chona, si ella me quiere dar la bendición y me dice, oye, mija, vamos a la iglesia para que te dé la bendición, I'm gonna have her rub that candle all over my face and all over my body while praying in Zapoteco. And I'll go to church with her because she asked me to. And guess what? Esa bendición me la va a dar en español y en Zapoteco. Just these videos to me are coming off as very self-righteous and very victim blaming, like, oh, you're still colonized? Like, how? What's, like, is there something wrong with you? It's like, dude, like, let people take their own course. Like, this didn't happen overnight. Our people were not colonized overnight. It's not going to be easy to leave the faith overnight. O sea, y más siendo de un pueblo, no tienes acceso al internet, no tienes acceso a información así tan rápidamente como aquí en los Estados Unidos. And if you've been, or if you're from a pueblo, you know there's only one fucking channel that the freaking antenna gets, and that's usually fucking Televisa y la pinche Rosa de Guadalupe. I get what people like this are trying to do. I get the anger towards it. Trust me, I was in that phase. I would argue with my mom. I would be like, how do you still believe this? But honestly, her believing doesn't make her any less indigenous. And if religion helps her cope, being here so far away from su pueblo, rezando en Zapoteco, and, you know, just as an immigrant in general, then so be it. Who am I to tell her, stop believing in that? No, that's so self-righteous. I'm not gonna do that.
Homophobia, the F slur, the F slur. Homophobia, the F slur. Shockingly homophobic. You have never heard homophobia this bad.